Lysara squinted into the harsh Zaaris sun, the distant horizon a smudge of browns and reds like a toddler's attempt at art. Except this art didn't get hung on the fridge, it got shoved in a corner of the galaxy no one really gave a damn about. She kicked a rock, sending it skittering across the gritty, rust-colored ground. "Why are we here again?" she muttered to herself. "Something about science, truth, and justice," came a voice from behind her. Lysara turned to see Jax, her partner in scientific crime, leaning against the entrance to the ancient ruins they were supposed to be studying. He always had that look on his face, like he just told a joke only he found funny. Or maybe it was just the glory of getting away from the lab coats and into the dust. "Well, we've certainly got enough dust," she replied, brushing at her stained jacket. Dust was a constant companion on Zaaris, like a clingy ex who didn't understand boundaries. "And I'm still waiting for the glory part." Jax shrugged, grinning. "Patience, my dear. Glory takes time, just like a fine wine or a really good stew." "Or a really bad excuse," Lysara shot back, rolling her eyes. But that's why she liked Jax. His humor was as dry as the planet they were stuck on. They had been sent to Zaaris by the Universal Research Consortium, a group of scientists and bureaucrats who made decisions from the comfort of their cushy space stations, far from the heat and dust of places like Zaaris. Their mission: map the ruins, uncover secrets, and hopefully not die in the process. Easy, right? "So what's on the agenda for today?" Jax asked, pulling out a battered datapad that had seen better days. "Something thrilling, I hope. Maybe a run-in with some hostile flora or a sandstorm that'll strip us down to our skivvies." "I was thinking more along the lines of poking around these ruins until we find something interesting," Lysara replied, trying to ignore the faint hum in the air that only added to her discomfort. Although a sandstorm might actually be a nice change of pace. They walked into the ruins, the air immediately cooler, though it brought no relief from Lysara's gnawing sense of unease. The walls, carved with symbols that no one alive could decipher, loomed around them. It was like walking through the dusty remnants of history's drunk text messages, full of meaning that was just out of reach. "Ever think these symbols might just be ancient graffiti?" Jax suggested, pointing to a particularly intricate carving. "Like some alien teenager just got bored one millennium and decided to mess with us." Lysara chuckled, despite herself. "I'd pay good credits to see the alien equivalent of Kilroy was here." As they ventured deeper, the hum grew louder, vibrating through the soles of her boots. It was unsettling, like an itch at the back of her mind that she couldn't quite scratch. "You hear that?" she asked, stopping in her tracks. Jax paused, tilting his head. "Yeah, I thought it was just the sound of my own brilliance echoing back at me." "Funny," Lysara said, though her face tightened as they continued. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, each step heavy with the weight of what they might find, or what might find them. They reached the heart of the ruins, a cavernous chamber that swallowed their footsteps. In the center stood a device, or what was left of it, a jumble of wires and metal that might have been advanced technology or just a really complex piece of modern art. "Now this is where the magic happens," Jax murmured, circling the contraption. "I'm getting tingles just looking at it." "Careful," Lysara warned as he reached out to touch a wire. "You might blow us up before we even get a chance to be heroes." "Then again, maybe we'd become legends," Jax replied, undeterred. "The idiots who poked the ancient bear. Let's try living legends, shall we?" Lysara said, drawing a scanner from her utility belt. As she waved it over the device, the hum intensified, a low growl that resonated through her bones. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Jax commented, peering over her shoulder. The scanner bleeped angrily, displaying readings that made Lysara's stomach churn. "These readings. It's like nothing I've ever seen." "I'd hope not," Jax said, tapping the screen. "Otherwise we might be in the wrong line of work." The truth hit her like a bolt of lightning, sharp and unwelcome. "They're harvesting nightmares," Jax blinked. "Nightmares, as in bad dreams." As in fueling whatever this is, Lysara replied, stepping back from the device as if it might reach out and drag her into its twisted machinations. They're using human nightmares as a power source. Jax let out a low whistle. Well, there's a business model. Why waste good old-fashioned terror? Lysara shook her head, the implications swirling around her like a storm. This isn't just unethical, it's genius, Jax offered, smiling wanly. I was going to say monstrous, Lysara replied, though she couldn't entirely dismiss the dark admiration creeping in. But sure, let's go with genius. They stood there, the gravity of the discovery settling over them like the dust coating everything else on this forsaken planet. For a moment, neither spoke, each contemplating the implications of their find. Then Jax broke the silence, his voice low. So, what do we do about it? Lysara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the universe pressing on her shoulders. We figure out how to stop it, or at least make sure someone else knows about it. Jax nodded, his usual levity absent. Guess we'll need to make sure we don't end up as Fuel ourselves. Lysara forced a smile. Yeah, I'd rather not become the star of someone's cosmic horror story. With that, they turned to leave, their footsteps echoing like the drumbeat of some ancient ritual, each step a reminder of the danger they now faced. As they emerged into the unrelenting daylight, the ruins and their secret loomed behind them, a testament to the cruelty and cleverness that lay at the heart of the universe. Lysara looked at Jax, trying to inject some humor into the grim reality. Well, at least it's not Monday. Jax chuckled, though it sounded hollow. Yeah, and at least we don't have to worry about a boring 9 to 5. They exchanged a look, a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that their lives had just taken a turn for the complicated and dangerous. The ruins had given up one of their secrets, but there were surely more lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But for now, all they had was each other, and the knowledge that nightmares weren't just for sleeping anymore. As they prepared to return to the colony, the distant horizon still a smear of browns and reds, Lysara couldn't shake the feeling that their discoveries were just beginning. And with the universe holding its breath, the end was nowhere in sight. The sun on Zaaris was a relentless bastard, stubbornly refusing to set. It turned the planet into a giant, intergalactic barbecue, and they were the overcooked sausages destined to be forgotten until too late. Lysara wiped her brow, the sweat mixed with dust forming a gritty paste that made her skin crawl. Next time, remind me to pack some climate control, she muttered. Sure, Jax replied, not looking up from his datapad. Maybe I'll pack a portable black hole, too. You know, just in case we need to make a quick getaway. They were trudging back to base camp, each step kicking up more of the omnipresent dust. If ever there was a planet that needed a good sweeping, it was Zaaris. Lysara couldn't help but think of the ruins, their dark secret gnawing at her. So, what's your take on powering a civilization with nightmares? She asked. Sounds like a good plan for a theme park, Jax said, finally pocketing the datapad with a sigh. Might even be cheaper than solar. I can see the slogan now, powering your futures with your fears. Lysara snorted, then turned serious. It's sick, though. Yeah. But isn't that just the universe for you? One big playground for sociopaths. The camp was a sad collection of tents and prefab units, blending into the background like a bad memory. As they approached, Lysara noticed a figure waiting, a stranger with a posture that screamed, I'm up to no good. Who the hell is that? Jax asked, his hand instinctively brushing against the side of his jacket where his blaster rested. Just our luck if he's here to sell us timeshares, Lysara replied. The stranger stepped forward, his face masked by a hood, because of course it was. Lysara, Jax, he asked, voice smooth as oil. The kind that usually slicked over something sharp. Depends, Jax said. You selling something, more like sharing something, the stranger replied. He pulled back his hood, revealing the face of someone who'd seen tougher days than the planet they were standing on. Name's Zaaris. Jax and Lysara exchanged glances. And what exactly are you sharing, Zaaris? Truth. Needed like a hole in the head, I know, but it's what I've got. He gestured towards the tents. Mind if we step inside? Could use a break from the great outdoors. Jax shrugged. Might as well hear him out. Worst case, we get an excuse to leave him with the dust bunnies. Inside, the tent was marginally cooler, though not by much. Zynar took a seat, looking about as comfortable as a cat in water. You found it, didn't you? The device in the ruins. Lysara crossed her arms, wary. What do you know about it more than I'd like? Zynar's expression was grim. The aliens, same ones that used to run this dust ball, they were working on a way to boost nightmare production. Turns out fear is a pretty efficient energy source. Wait, Jax interrupted, leaning forward. Are we talking monsters under the bed efficient or universal panic button efficient? The latter. Zynar's eyes were hard, full of the weight of truth. They planned to engineer fear on a massive scale. Amplify nightmares, feed the terror, and harness the power. Lysara felt a chill despite the heat. So what, they were planning to turn the galaxy into one big bedtime horror story, precisely. And the device you found, it's a prototype. A test run that somehow never got fully operational. Yet, Jax added, his tone bone dry. Yet, Zynar agreed. Someone's still trying to make it work. That's why I'm here. Lysara raised a skeptical eyebrow. And why should we trust you? Zynar sighed, looking down at his hands. Because I'm tired of running. I used to work for them. Wasn't exactly my finest career choice, but here I am trying to make amends before they bury me in the dust. So you're a political dissident, Jax said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Former employee of a failed cosmic horror show, Zynar corrected. Look, I know I don't have much to offer, but I've got intel. Information on who might be trying to finish what those aliens started. Lysara exchanged another look with Jax. We don't have much choice, do we? Nope, Jax replied. But hey, at least it beats dying of boredom. Lysara turned back to Zynar. All right. Tell us what you know. Zynar leaned forward, his voice low. The device is designed to tap into the collective subconscious. It amplifies fear, spreads it like a virus. The more people fear, the more power it generates. Sounds like bad news, Jax said. But there's got to be a way to stop it, right? There is, Zynar said. But it's risky, aren't all good plans. Lysara said, trying to keep things light even as the room seemed to close in around them. We need to make sure the device can't be activated. Disable it permanently, and how do we do that? Jax asked. By getting to the control center, the heart of the ruins, and shutting it down from there. Lysara looked at Jax, then back at Zynar. And you're going to help us with this? Zynar nodded. It's why I came here. To make sure it never gets turned on, Jax snorted. You know, I always hoped my death would be quick and painless, like in my sleep. But I guess running headlong into ancient alien tech will have to do. Always the optimist, Lysara said, unable to suppress a grin. Zynar stood, determination etched into his features. We'll need to move quickly. There's no telling how close they are to getting it online. Lysara nodded, feeling the weight of their mission settle on her shoulders. All right. Then let's do what we can to stop this nightmare machine. Jax clapped Zynar on the back. Welcome to the team. Hope you're not allergic to dust. Not the worst thing I've inhaled, Zynar replied with a wry smile. They set out once more, the three of them now bound by a common purpose. The ruins loomed in the distance, silent and foreboding, a reminder of the secrets that lay within. As they trudged through the dust, Lysara felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Their task was daunting, but at least they weren't alone. Anyone else getting déjà vu? Jax quipped as they re-entered the ruins. Like we were just here, feels like a homecoming, Zynar said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. Lysara took point, scanning for any signs of trouble. The hum was back, louder now, like an insistent whisper at the edge of her mind. I don't like this, she said. Feels too easy. They might not know we're here yet, Zynar said. Or they're saving the fireworks for later. Comforting thought, Jax muttered. Next time, remind me to bring a bigger gun. They made their way through the corridors, the symbols on the walls seeming to watch them with silent judgment. As they approached the heart of the ruins, Lysara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Anyone else feel that? She asked, pausing at the entrance to the central chamber. Like a million eyes judging your bad life choices, Jax replied. Yeah, getting it loud and clear. Focus, Zynar said. We're close. The chamber was as they had left it, the device still in the center. But something was different, an energy in the air that felt almost alive. We need to get to the control panel, Zynar said, pointing to a set of consoles against the far wall. Lysara nodded, leading the way. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the consoles, the hum growing to a crescendo. This better work, she muttered, reaching for the controls. Jack stood guard, eyes scanning the shadows. Let's hope Zynar's intel is as good as he says. It is, Zynar replied, joining Lysara at the console. I've been in here before. These symbols got to punch them in the right sequence. Great, Lysara said, trying to decipher the alien script, which means we're screwed, not quite. Zynar pointed to a series of symbols. I remember these, it's like a lock. We just need the right combination. Lysara hesitated, then started pressing the symbols Zynar indicated. With each press the hum seemed to change, shifting in pitch. Please tell me this won't blow us up, she said. Only if you get it wrong, Zynar replied, a hint of teasing in his voice. No pressure then, Jax added, the sarcasm thick. The final symbol clicked into place and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Did we do it? Lysara asked, holding her breath. The hum died down, replaced by an eerie silence. Zynar nodded, relief etched into his features. We did it. The device is disabled. Jax let out a low whistle. Well, would you look at that? We're not dead, yet, Lysara echoed, feeling the enormity of what they'd just done. They'd stopped the nightmare machine, at least for now. But she knew better than to let her guard down. The galaxy was full of surprises, most of them unpleasant. Guess we're heroes, Zynar said, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. Or martyrs in training, Jax said, ever the realist. They turned to leave, the weight of their accomplishment mingling with the inevitability of what lay ahead. As they stepped into the light, Lysara felt a strange sense of hope, tempered by the knowledge that their battle was far from over. Well, she said, trying to lighten the mood. At least we don't have to worry about nightmares for a while. Jax grinned, slinging an arm around her shoulder. I dunno. I've heard that the universe is always hiring for new horrors. Then I guess we'll just have to stay on our toes, Lysara replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. Behind them, the ruins stood silent, their secrets just a little less mysterious. But for now, all they could do was move forward, one step at a time, into whatever new madness awaited. The sun on Zaaris didn't just refuse to set, it seemed actively hostile to the concept. It hung there, a relentless burning eye that watched with an accusatory glare. Lysara squinted against its light, more out of habit than any hope of making the view less hellish. She and Jax were back at base camp, which was currently as lively as a funeral in a vacuum. Dust devils swirled lazily around tents that had seen better days, or, more realistically, probably never had any good days to speak of. Reckon we're the universe's favorite punching bag? Jax asked, absent-mindedly poking at his battered datapad. It wasn't doing much of anything useful, but he liked the feel of it in his hands, as if it provided some semblance of control in a situation that was careening towards chaos at warp speed. Only if it's running out of things to punch, Lysara replied, her voice thick with dry wit. She glanced at Zynar, who was busy scribbling something on a piece of paper. Paper, of all things. The guy was a walking anachronism. You know, Zynar, she said, we have these things called datapads now. Old habits, Zynar muttered, not looking up. Besides, paper doesn't glitch when the sun decides to cook it. Can't argue with that, Jax conceded. But if we're going to pull off this let's not die horribly plan, we're going to need more than just paper. Right, Lysara said, cracking her knuckles. Let's see if we can scrounge up some help. We're going to need more hands, preferably attached to bodies that know how to use them. Preferably not attached to bodies that explode under pressure, Jax added helpfully. They set out to gather a team, trudging through the camp like recruiting officers of the damned. The other inhabitants of base camp were a colorful collection of scientists, mercenaries, and the occasional scavenger trying to make a quick credit. Not exactly the stuff of legends, but they'd have to do. Their first recruit was a wiry fellow named Tenka, who was busy tinkering with an ancient piece of tech that looked about as stable as a politician's promise. "Hey, Tenka," Lysara called. "Feel like joining a suicide mission?" Tenka didn't even look up. "Depends. Is there a chance for glory? More like a chance to not get vaporized," Jack said. "Which, in some circles, constitutes glory. Count me in," Tenka replied, setting his gadget aside. "Always wanted to go out with a bang. Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Lysara muttered, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Next on their list was a medic, because nothing says optimism like preparing for injuries. They found Dr. Sareen inspecting a row of medical supplies that looked suspiciously like they'd been put together by a blindfolded chimp. "Doc, we could use your expertise," Lysara said, trying not to think too much about how much blood they'd be losing in this endeavor. Sareen looked up, her eyes like twin lasers of cynicism. "I hope you don't expect me to patch up stupidity. Only if you consider charging into alien ruins without a plan stupid," Jax replied. "Then I suppose I'm in," Sareen said, with a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 facepalms. With their motley crew assembled, they convened in the largest tent, an optimistic term for a glorified tarp held together by hope and duct tape. Zynar took the lead, laying out a map of the ruins on a table that threatened to collapse under the weight of a strong breeze. "So here's the deal," Zynar said, pointing to the map. "We need to ensure that the device stays offline permanently, which means we need to make sure anyone else trying to turn it on finds themselves experiencing technical difficulties, preferably the lethal kind," Jax added. "That's where genetic modifications come in," Zynar continued. "We need to experiment with ways to resist the device's effects entirely, make it so it can't tap into our fear responses." "Sounds risky," Tenka said, his voice almost drowned out by the tent's flapping. "Risky is the name of the game," Lysara said. "We're in it, whether we like it or not," Zynar nodded. "We've got some samples from the ruins, DNA strands from the alien tech. With the right modifications, we might be able to engineer some resistance, and the wrong modifications," Sareen asked, her tone sharp as a scalpel. "Potentially unpleasant side effects," Zynar admitted. "But we don't have much choice." "Well, that's reassuring," Jax said. Just another day in paradise. They set to work, Tenka and Zynar huddled over a makeshift lab that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and fever dreams. Sareen supervised, her expression a mix of skepticism and morbid curiosity. "This isn't exactly my area of expertise," Jax said, standing back with his arms crossed. "But I'd like to know what kind of side effects we're talking about here." "Oh, you know," Zynar said, adjusting a vial of glowing liquid. "Mild nausea, headaches, maybe some temporary insanity. Is that all?" Lysara asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Worst case, you might grow an extra limb or two," Zynar said with a shrug. "Could come in handy, really." They all stared at him. "Please tell me you're joking," Tenka said. "Mostly," Zynar replied. "But we won't know until we try." "Brilliant," Jax muttered. "We're either going to save the galaxy or start the universe's weirdest circus." "Let's get on with it," Lysara said, steeling herself. They didn't have time for second thoughts, not that first thoughts were all that comforting. They began the process, injecting themselves with the modified serum while Sareen monitored their vitals. The first few minutes were tense, filled with the hum of equipment and the occasional curse as someone knocked over a piece of the makeshift lab. "Feeling anything yet?" Sareen asked, her eyes flicking between them like a hawk sizing up potential prey. "A bit tingly," Tenka said, waving a hand in front of his face. "Like ants doing a Kangal line under my skin." "Same here," Jax agreed. Though it could just be my nerves staging a protest. They waited, each minute dragging by like a century under the relentless Zaaris sun. Lysara's mind raced with possibilities, each one more absurd than the last. Finally, Tenka let out a low whistle. "Well, I'm not growing a third eye yet, so that's a start." "Give it time," Zynar said, glancing at the readouts. "We'll need to monitor for any changes." Keep an eye on each other. Great, Jax said. So we're our own babysitters now. More like babysitters with a penchant for creative solutions, Lysara said. But yeah, pretty much. The Iors passed with a mixture of anticipation and dread. They busied themselves with preparations, each task a welcome distraction from the chaos brewing inside their cells. Jax kept an eye on the perimeter, ever the pragmatist. Lysara went over plans again and again, feeling the weight of responsibility like an anchor around her neck. It was near dusk, not that you could tell on Zaaris, when the first side effect reared its ugly head. Tenka doubled over, clutching his stomach with a pained grunt. Ugh, guys. I think the ants have upgraded to power drills. Sareen hurried over, checking his vitals. His heart rate skyrocketing, she said. Zynar, what did you put in this stuff? Not sure, Zynar said with disarming honesty. But let's hope it doesn't involve spontaneous combustion. Tenka groaned, teeth gritted against the pain. That would be nice to avoid. Breathe, Tenka, Sareen said, her voice calm but firm. We'll get through this. Lysara felt a pang of guilt. She dragged them all into this madness, and now they were paying the price. Hang in there, Tenka. We need you. Don't worry, Jax said, his voice light despite the tension. He's too stubborn to let a little thing like bodily disintegration stop him. Tenka managed a weak grin, though it was more grimace than amusement. Damn right. I've survived worse. As the night dragged on, they took turns watching over Tenka, whose condition gradually stabilized. The rest of the crew showed varying degrees of discomfort. Headaches, muscle spasms, the occasional bout of vertigo, but nothing as dramatic as Tenka's ordeal. Looks like we're settling into a new normal, Zynar said, checking his own pulse with a practiced hand. Or at least, as normal as anything gets on this rock. Let's hope these modifications actually do what they're supposed to, Lysara said. Because otherwise, we're just screwing around with our DNA for fun. Well, it's not like we have much choice, Jax said. Unless you've got a better plan stashed somewhere. Not yet, Lysara admitted. But we're working on it. In the silence that followed, Lysara felt the weight of the moment settle around her shoulders like a particularly uncomfortable cloak. They were standing on the precipice of something vast and terrifying, and there was no turning back. Well, she said, trying to inject some levity into the situation. At least we've got front row seats to whatever happens next, assuming we're not the main attraction, Jax said. Let's not kid ourselves, Zynar interjected, wiping sweat from his brow. We're right in the center ring, great, Lysara said. And here I thought we were just the clowns. The laughter that followed was strained, but it was laughter all the same. It was a small thing, but it made the crushing weight of the unknown just a little more bearable, if only for a moment. As they sat there, each lost in their thoughts, they knew that the road ahead was long and fraught with danger. But at least they weren't walking it alone. And for now, that was enough. The sun on Zaaris was as relentless as an unpaid merc. It hung in the sky like a smug landlord, refusing to give the beleaguered tenants of base camp any relief. And speaking of beleaguered tenants, Lysara was squinting at the horizon, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that today was going to be one of those days. You know, the kind that ends in a poorly planned evacuation or someone exploding. She pinched the bridge of her nose, the dry wit she'd become known for feeling more like a defense mechanism than a personality trait. Jax was nearby, tapping away at his battered datapad like it owed him money. The thing was about as useful as a rubber hammer in a gunfight, but it was something, especially when they didn't have much else. Any luck with that thing? Lysara asked, though she wasn't holding her breath. Depends on what you mean by luck, Jax replied, not looking up. If you mean finding new ways for it to disappoint me, then yes. Loads of luck. Fantastic, Lysara muttered. Maybe we'll stumble upon a working piece of tech before we die of old age. Their banter was cut short by a sudden, ground-shaking explosion in the distance. The sound rolled through the camp like an unwanted guest, rattling tents and nerves alike. What the hell was that? Tenka yelled from inside the makeshift lab, his head poking out like a gopher checking for snakes. We under attack, Lysara snapped, already reaching for her blaster. It was instinctual at this point. She wasn't sure if she'd ever stop reaching for it, even in her sleep. "Looks like it," Jax said, eyes scanning the horizon. "Our alien friends aren't sending welcome baskets anymore." "Great," Lysara said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just when I thought we could use a little less chaos around here." The camp erupted into a flurry of activity, or what passed for it anyway. Scientists, mercenaries, and scavengers alike scrambled for cover or grabbed whatever weaponry they could find. Lysara was in the thick of it, barking orders and trying to keep some semblance of order in the chaos. "Zynar, any idea what they're throwing at us this time?" she shouted, spotting him ducking behind a tent that looked like it could collapse with a stiff breeze. "Big, loud, and probably deadly," Zynar replied, peering around the corner with the careful precision of a man who valued his head staying attached to his shoulders. "Thanks for that expert analysis," Jax quipped, fiddling with his datapad in what could generously be described as an optimistic attempt to get it to work. "Well, unless you want a closer look, that's all I've got," Zynar shot back. "But whatever it is, it's not human tech." "No kidding," Tenka said, joining them with a grimace, his stomach apparently still doing the cha-cha from their earlier genetic experiments. "Humans at least make stuff that blows up properly." Sareen arrived, looking as calm as a surgeon about to start a tricky operation. "We need to hold the perimeter," she said, her tone suggesting it wasn't up for debate. "Yeah, because we wouldn't want to let our guests wander around unsupervised," Jax said, sarcasm dialed up to 11. Despite the humor, the situation was dire. The aliens had upped their game, and it wasn't going to end with just a few fancy fireworks. The team divided up, each taking a position to defend the camp. Lysara found herself behind a hastily erected barricade, her blaster ready and eyes scanning the horizon. "Remember," she called out, "let's not die horribly today." "Great pep talk," Tenka said from somewhere to her left. Real morale booster. The first wave of alien attackers came into view, a mix of biomechanical nightmares that looked like they were designed by a sadistic child with a penchant for insects. They moved with a purpose, and that purpose seemed to involve tearing base camp apart. "Here they come," Jax announced from his vantage point, which was only slightly better than standing on a stool and shouting. The tension in the air was as thick as the dust on Zaaris. Lysara's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline sharpening her focus. The first shots rang out, and the air was filled with the sounds of blaster fire and the shrill, mechanical screeches of the alien attackers. "Keep them off the equipment," Zynar yelled, though it was hard to hear over the cacophony of battle. Lysara took aim, squeezing the trigger and watching as one of the alien constructs crumpled to the ground in a shower of sparks. "Got one," she shouted, though the small victory felt hollow amidst the chaos. "Don't celebrate yet," Tenka called back, taking out another with a well-placed shot. "They've got numbers on their side." "Yeah, but we've got sheer stubbornness," Jax said, as if that was somehow more valuable than firepower. The battle was a blur of energy blasts, panic shouts, and the relentless advance of the alien forces. For everyone they took down, it seemed like two more took its place. Lysara's muscles burned with fatigue, but she pushed through, determined not to let the camp fall. "Any chance our genetic mods will kick in and turn us into unstoppable superhumans?" Jax asked, ducking as a stray blast whizzed past his head. "Isn't that supposed to be your department?" Lysara shot back, gritting her teeth as she fired again. It was a desperate, brutal fight, the kind that left no room for second thoughts or hesitation. Lysara and her team held the line, driven by a mixture of fear, determination, and the grim understanding that failure wasn't an option. "Here," Zynar called out from behind the barricade, waving a piece of paper like it was a magic spell. "I think this might be useful." Lysara glanced over, managing to catch sight of the scribbled notes through the haze of battle. "What the hell is that? A potential weakness," Zynar replied, as if that explained everything. "Something in their coding, of course," Jax muttered. Because what this fight really needed was a mid-battle science lesson. Despite the absurdity of it all, Lysara felt a flicker of hope. If there was a chance, however slim, that they could exploit a weakness in the alien technology, they had to take it. "Can you patch it through the comms?" she asked, already knowing the answer would be some form of "I'll try." "I'll try," Zaaris confirmed, already fiddling with his datapad, or at least what was left of it after the day's abuse. The battle raged on, each second stretching into an eternity. But amid the chaos, Zaaris' discovery was a beacon of grim hope. If they could hack the alien tech, even temporarily, it might just give them the edge they needed. "Keep them busy," Lysara ordered, laying down cover fire while Zaaris worked his magic, or whatever passed for magic these days. The air was thick with tension, the noise of battle drowning out any coherent thought. But then, as if by some miracle of fate or folly, a sound crackled over the comms. It was garbled, barely audible, but it was there. "Got it," Zaaris shouted, his voice alight with triumph. For a brief, shining moment, the alien constructs hesitated, their movements slowing as if caught in some digital web. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Now's our chance," Lysara yelled, the energy in her voice infectious. They pushed forward, taking advantage of the momentary lapse in the alien onslaught. Blaster fire lit up the battlefield, and with each alien construct that fell, the odds shifted ever so slightly in their favor. "Looks like your magic paper worked," Jax said, a rare note of admiration in his voice. "Yeah, well, let's not make a habit of relying on it," Zaaris replied, his relief tempered by the knowledge that their victory was only a temporary reprieve. The battle wound down, the last of the alien constructs falling silent in a heap of twisted metal and broken code. The team gathered together, bruised, exhausted, and somehow still standing. "Not bad," Tenka said, wiping sweat from his brow. "For a bunch of amateurs." "Speak for yourself," Sareen said, tending to a minor wound with the efficiency of someone who knew she had bigger problems to worry about. "Let's not get too comfortable," Lysara said, her voice steady despite the chaos they'd just survived. "They'll be back, and next time they won't be as easy to fool." "Great," Jax said, pocketing his datapad with a sigh. "Just what I wanted to hear, more alien invasions." The tension in the air had lifted, but only slightly. The victory was won, but it was a tenuous one, like standing on the edge of a cliff and knowing that the rocks beneath your feet could give way at any moment. "Let's regroup," Lysara said, her mind already spinning with plans and contingencies. "We need to figure out our next move." The team nodded, too tired to argue, too aware of the stakes to do anything else. They trudged back toward the camp, their steps heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. "Hey, at least we didn't die horribly," Tenka said, trying for levity in the face of the overwhelming odds stacked against them. "Yet," Jax corrected, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The laughter that followed was weary, but it carried a note of determination. They were still here, still fighting, and still refusing to back down in the face of impossible odds. As the sun continued to blaze overhead, unrelenting and indifferent, Lysara and her crew knew that they were far from finished. There would be more battles, more challenges, and more moments where survival seemed like a distant dream. But for now, they had a plan, a fragile, precious thing that might just keep them alive a little longer. And in a place like Zaaris, sometimes that was the best you could hope for. The sun on Zaaris was as relentless as ever, an eternal, angry god casting its unforgiving gaze upon the beleaguered base camp. No shadows to hide in, no respite from the heat, just a continuous assault on the senses. It was enough to make a person wish for a good old-fashioned rainstorm or, failing that, a quick and painless death. "Looks like we got ourselves another wave," Jax announced, using his battered datapad more like a cocktail napkin than a sophisticated piece of tech. The thing was about as reliable as a politician's promise, but it was all they had. Lysara glanced at the horizon, where a fresh batch of alien constructs skittered into view. "Well, isn't that just the cherry on top of our shit sundae?" Beside her, Zaaris was busy with his paper, scratching away like a mad scientist who preferred ink to pixels. "Wish I had time to figure out what keeps drawing these things to us," he muttered, clearly frustrated that his talents were being used for survival instead of intellectual curiosity. Maybe they just like the view, Tenka quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Or maybe it's your charming personality, Lysara. If that's the case, we're doomed, she shot back, checking her blaster with a practiced efficiency that belied the knot of tension in her stomach. The first of the alien constructs hit the perimeter, and the camp erupted into chaos once more. Blaster fire lit up the unforgiving landscape, and the air was filled with the high-pitched screeches of machines designed for one purpose: to tear them apart. "Any brilliant ideas, Zaaris?" Jax shouted, ducking as a stray energy blast singed the top of his ginger curls. "Now would be a great time for a eureka moment." "Working on it," Zaaris called back, rifling through his notes as if searching for a misplaced grocery list rather than a lifeline. The attack was relentless. The aliens pushed harder, their numbers seemingly endless. Lysara's hands were steady on her blaster, but her mind was racing, calculating, anticipating the moment they would be overrun. "Want to bet how long before we run out of ammo?" Jax hollered over the sound of battle. $50 says we don't make it past lunch." "I'll take that bet," Tenka replied, firing off a round with grim determination. Lunch was never on the menu anyway. Despite their bravado, they were losing ground. The alien constructs were adapting, learning even. Each wave was stronger, more coordinated, like a nightmare that refused to wake up. The camp was shrinking, the perimeter closing in as they fought to hold the line. Then came the moment Lysara had been dreading. Sarene barked a warning, and the makeshift barricade they had erected gave way under the pressure of the assault. It was like watching a dam burst, chaos spilling out in all directions. "Fall back," Lysara ordered, cursing under her breath as she covered the retreat. Her team scrambled, doing their best to hold together under the onslaught. The ruins loomed ahead, their shadowy interiors promising a different sort of danger but at least a temporary refuge from the heat and carnage. Lysara hated the thought of retreating, but there were no other options. They needed to regroup, to plan, to survive. "Everyone inside," she yelled, waving them on. "And try not to trip over each other. I'd hate to lose anyone to clumsiness." The team tumbled into the ruins, breathless and battered, the echoes of battle still ringing in their ears. The dim corridors of the ancient structure felt like stepping into a different world, one where they were just as likely to be devoured by darkness as by aliens. "Cozy," Jax commented, leaning against a crumbling wall and trying to catch his breath. "It's like being inside a haunted toaster oven." "Yeah, well, it's what we've got," Lysara replied, her voice strained but steady. "Let's figure out a plan before they find a way in." Zaaris was already examining the walls, his fascination with the place a constant even as his hands shook with adrenaline. "These markings. They might tell us something. If only I had more time." "Well, if we don't come up with something, you'll have all the time in the world," Tenka said, his smile a grimace. "The afterlife is pretty patient, I've heard." The situation was dire. Supplies were running dangerously low, and the reality of their predicament was starting to weigh heavily on their shoulders. They were trapped, outnumbered, and outgunned, with only the crumbling walls of the ruins standing between them and certain death. "What's it gonna be, Lysara?" Jax asked, looking to her for the leadership she seemed to effortlessly embody, even when their odds were worse than a snowball's in hell. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their survival pressing down like a leaden cloak. "We make a stand here," she said finally, her voice carrying the kind of resolve that could cut through steel. "We may not have much, but we've got brains, guts, and a whole lot of stubborn." "Brains, guts, and stubborn," Sarene repeated, nodding as she patched up a gash on her leg. "Sounds like a recipe for something. Let's hope it's not our last meal." They huddled together, Lysara outlining the basics of their last stand: what positions to take, how to ration the scant ammunition left, and how to utilize every scrap of knowledge Zainar's scribbles might hold. It was a desperate plan, but desperate was all they had left. "You know," Jax mused, fiddling with his datapad as if it might miraculously spring to life and solve all their problems. "This might be the worst camping trip I've ever been on." "At least there are no mosquitoes," Tenka said, laughing despite the bleakness of their situation. "Just biomechanical nightmares hell-bent on annihilating us." "Small mercies, eh?" "Yeah, well, let's hope they don't start a campfire in here," Lysara replied, scanning the darkened corridors for any sign of movement. "We'd go up like matchsticks." Their laughter was thin and tinged with desperation, but it was laughter all the same. It was all they had to hold onto in the thick soup of despair that threatened to swallow them whole. The silence of the ruins stretched out, filled only with the distant, ominous sounds of the aliens regrouping outside. It was a ticking clock, and every second that passed drew them closer to the inevitable. Lysara's mind spun through options like a busted roulette wheel, never landing on anything promising. She checked her blaster again, more out of habit than necessity, and caught Zynar's eye. "Got anything for us, paper boy?" she asked, hoping for a miracle she knew was unlikely. "I might," he said, his voice tentative. "These symbols, they suggest an energy source, something connected to the nightmares." "Nightmares?" Jax interjected. "What, like those therapy sessions I keep skipping?" "More like the stuff that powers their tech," Zynar explained, running a hand through his hair which had taken on the consistency of straw. "It's all theoretical, but if we could disrupt it, it might give us a fighting chance." Lysara finished for him, her mind latching onto the possibility like a lifeline. "Or blow us all to hell," Tenka added, ever the realist. "Can't be worse than what we've got now," Sareen chimed in. "Let's face it, we're screwed either way. Might as well go out with a bang." Lysara surveyed her ragtag crew, their faces lined with dirt and determination. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. "All right," she said, her voice firm with the kind of resolve that refused to die quietly. "Let's do this. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." The team nodded, grim-faced and ready. It wasn't a heroic stand or a desperate last effort. It was simply what needed to be done. Zynar went to work, deciphering the ancient symbols and scrawling notes as if his life depended on it, because it did. The rest of them set up defenses, turning the ruins into a fortress of sorts. It was all slapdash and impromptu, but it was theirs. As they worked, the ominous sounds from outside grew louder, the clattering of alien limbs drawing ever closer. Their time was running out, and they all knew it. "How's it going, Zynar?" Lysara called, casting a quick glance at the doorway, her nerves stretched to their limits. "I'm close," he replied, words punctuated by the rapid scribble of pen on paper. "Just need a bit more time." "Time," Jack snorted, checking the remaining charge on his blaster. "That's the one thing we don't have." The ruins echoed with the sounds of impending battle, the air thick with the anticipation of violence. The light from their meager equipment cast long shadows, dancing like mocking specters on the walls. "Here they come," Sareen said, her voice as calm as if she were announcing the weather. Lysara took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come. "Remember," she told them, "no dying without my permission." Despite the tension, a few chuckles rippled through the group. It was a small comfort, a reminder that they were still human in the face of everything trying to strip that away. The aliens hit them like a storm, chaotic, merciless, relentless. The walls shook with the impact, dust and debris raining down like confetti at a particularly grim party. Lysara's blaster sang in her hands, a deadly chorus that matched the rhythm of her heart. The air was filled with the acrid smell of energy discharges, and the shouts of her team melded with the mechanical screeches of their foes. "Zynar," she shouted, her voice barely carrying over the din. "Any time now. Almost." "There," he yelled back, fingers flying over his notes with the desperation of a gambler throwing their last chips on the table. The ruins felt alive, thrumming with an energy that was almost palpable. It was the kind of moment where everything teetered on the brink, where one wrong move could spell disaster. And then, like the eye of a storm, there was a sudden, impossible stillness. "Got it," Zynar cried, his voice exultant, triumphant, and desperately hopeful. A pulse of energy rippled through the ruins, a silent scream that sent the aliens into a frenzy. They staggered, faltering, as if caught in a web of their own nightmares. "Now!" Lysara shouted, the word a rallying cry that cut through the chaos. Her team surged forward, riding the wave of Zynar's discovery with everything they had. Blaster fire cut through the air, finding targets with ruthless efficiency. For a brief, glorious moment, it seemed like they might just make it, that they might survive against all odds despite the universe's best attempts to crush them. But as the dust settled and the echoes faded, reality came crashing back. They had won a battle, not the war. The ruins were still a tomb, and the world outside was still hell. "Well," Jack said, surveying the wreckage with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, "looks like we live to die another day." Lysara nodded, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. But in her heart a flicker of hope burned, a stubborn, defiant flame that refused to be snuffed out. They were still fighting, and as long as they were, there was a chance. And in a place like Zaaris, sometimes that was all you needed. The ruins were holding their collective breath, waiting for the next move in this cosmic game of cat and mouse. The team huddled in the dim light, each one nursing their own brand of despair and hope, like caffeine addicts with a cup half full of disappointment but still willing to drink it. Lysara, the de facto leader, mostly because nobody else wanted that particular noose around their neck, stood with her back straight and her eyes scanning the ancient script on the wall. It seemed like the universe's oldest instruction manual, complete with cryptic symbols and a healthy dose of existential dread. Typical alien architecture, built more for style than practicality. "So, are those things gonna tell us how to turn this nightmare vacation into a pleasure cruise?" Jax asked, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm only a man who's been shot at one too many times could muster. He poked at his datapad like a disgruntled gambler checking a busted lottery ticket. "Not exactly," Lysara replied, squinting at the symbols. "But they might just tell us how to crash their little party." "That's what I've always dreamed of," Tenka chimed in, his grin as lopsided as the current state of their morale. "Gate-crashing an alien shindig with nothing but hope and a blaster, just like my grandma used to do." "Your grandma sounds like she had more fun," Sareen muttered, still patching up her leg with the efficiency of a battle-hardened field medic. "I'd take a family reunion over this any day." Zynar, their resident scientist and professional warrior, was knee-deep in his own scribbles, the corners of his mind fraying like cheap carpet. "Lysara might be onto something," he said, his voice tight with a cocktail of excitement and fear. "The script talks about a feedback loop." "If we could reverse it," Jax interrupted, "as in make them choke on their own nightmares, sounds poetic and suicidal." "More like self-defense," Lysara corrected him, her gaze fixed on the wall as if it might spit out the answers if she stared long enough. "We turn their energy source against them, could give us the edge we need." "Edge, huh?" Sareen quipped while tying a makeshift bandage. "In a game that's more rigged than a carnival claw machine, I'll take any edge I can get." As if on cue, the distant sound of the alien constructs slithering through the ruins echoed back to them, a chilling reminder of the ticking clock they were all ignoring like an overdue bill. "Well, they are not here for our charming company," Tenka said, his voice light but eyes serious. "We better figure this out before they decide to come in and redecorate." Lysara nodded, her decision solidifying like concrete on a cold day. "All right, here's the plan. Zynar, you focus on how to get that feedback loop working. Everyone else, prep for another round." "They're not gonna wait for us to send out invitations." "And what do I do while you're all playing heroes?" Jax asked, his eyes flicking between the battered datapad and the blaster he kept close like an old friend. "Keep being our diplomatic envoy," Lysara said without missing a beat. "In other words, shoot anything that isn't us." "Ah, my favorite kind of diplomacy," Jax replied, a grin spreading across his face like a slow oil spill. "Very straightforward. With their plan as patchwork as the ruins around them, They settled into that tense, waiting game soldiers throughout history had known too well. It was like watching a storm gather on the horizon, knowing full well you had nothing but an umbrella full of holes. Zynar hunched over his notes, every line on his face carved deeper by concentration. The symbols danced in his mind, a language older than the dust choking the air around them. If he could just crack the code, they might stand a chance. And if not, well, being vaporized by alien tech sounded marginally better than being eaten alive. "How's it going, Zynar?" Lysara asked, keeping her voice low. The others were scattered around, checking gear and trying not to think too hard about the odds. "Like trying to interpret a map drawn by a drunk toddler," Zynar muttered, but there was a spark in his eyes, a glimmer of hope buried under the anxiety. "I think I've got it. I just need a bit more time." "Time," Jax echoed, glancing at the entrance to their makeshift fortress. "That's the one thing we can't bloody afford." "Hey, at least we're not bored," Tenka quipped, leaning against the wall with a nonchalance only the deeply screwed could muster. His blaster was cradled in his arms like a newborn. Nothing like a bit of impending doom to keep things interesting. The silence stretched out, a taut wire of anticipation strung through the air, vibrating with every distant sound of the aliens regrouping. There was a sick sort of camaraderie in it, the kind that only comes when you're all facing the same inevitable oblivion. "Zynar," Sarene called out, her voice steady as she checked her weapon one more time, "please tell me we're close to a miracle here." Zynar looked up, his face a grim map of hope and desperation. "Almost," he said, his voice catching in his throat. "Just a few more calculations." "Calculations," Jax muttered, giving his datapad a resigned tap. "Hope they're more reliable than this piece of junk." "Hey," Lysara said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, "at least your datapad doesn't have a death wish." "Only because it's not sentient," Jax shot back. The air was crackling with tension, the kind that felt like it could snap at any moment and send them all tumbling into chaos. But then, that was life on Zaaris. You took every breath like it might be your last, and you kept fighting because what else was there to do? "Got it," Zynar suddenly exclaimed, the relief in his voice as palpable as the dust they were all inhaling. "I think I've got a way to reverse the signal. It'll disrupt their link, maybe even give them a taste of their own nightmares." Lysara's heart leapt, though she kept her composure. "All right, guys," she said, her voice firm. "This is our shot. Zynar, get it ready. The rest of you gear up. We're taking the fight to them." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Tenka said, a wild grin spreading across his face. "Yeah," Jax added, sliding his datapad away and drawing his blaster with practiced ease. "Let's give them something to remember us by." With a sense of determination hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst, they set about preparing for the counterattack. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and sometimes that was all that mattered. As Zynar worked to activate the reversal, the sound of the alien constructs grew closer. The team stood ready, each one a coiled spring of nerves and adrenaline, tempered by the knowledge that they were fighting for their lives. "Showtime," Lysara said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The ruins seemed to hold their breath as Zynar activated the sequence, a ripple of energy that pulsed through the ancient stones. It spread like a wave, crashing against the constructs with a force that sent them reeling. The aliens faltered, their movements jerky and disoriented, like marionettes with severed strings. The feedback loop had worked, throwing the nightmares back upon their creators. "Now," Lysara commanded, and the team surged forward, blasters firing with a precision born of desperation and fury. They moved as one, cutting through the chaos with a singular focus. The aliens were caught in the throes of their own fears, an irony not lost on the humans who had been living with fear as their constant companion. For the first time, it felt like they had the upper hand, even if only for a fleeting moment. They pressed their advantage, pushing back the constructs with a ferocity that matched the stakes. The battle was a blur of motion and sound. the air alive with the crack and hiss of energy weapons and the guttural cries of the aliens. It was brutal and messy, the kind of fight that left scars on the soul as much as the body. But they fought on, each victory a small step toward survival, each enemy downed a testament to their will to live. As the dust began to settle and the echoes faded, the ruins stood silent once more. The team, battered but unbroken, gathered amidst the wreckage, their breaths mingling with the dust in a fragile peace. Jax looked around at the devastation, a wry smile on his face. "Well, that was fun," he said, his voice laced with a sarcasm that barely masked the relief beneath. "Shall we do it again sometime? Maybe after a long nap," Tenka replied, sinking to the ground with a weary laugh. "Don't get too comfortable," Lysara said, though her voice was softer now, the hard edges smoothed by exhaustion and gratitude. "We've still got a long way to go. But at least we're on the right track," Zainar added, dusting off his notes with a sense of accomplishment that was hard-earned and well-deserved. Sareen nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon where the aliens had retreated, their numbers thinning like steam in the relentless sun. "On the right track," she echoed, the words a promise and a prayer. They were still alive, still fighting, and in a place like Zaaris that was a victory in itself. As they regrouped and prepared for whatever lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain. They had each other, and they would face the darkness together. In the end, that was what mattered most. Lysara squinted at the relentless sun of Zaaris, a constant reminder that reality was far from the comforting darkness of space, where she could pretend the universe wasn't actively trying to kill her. Zainar was the picture of concentration and perpetual anxiety, his fingers dancing over his notes as if they might conjure a miracle if he believed hard enough. "We're ready as we'll ever be," Zainar announced, not exactly oozing confidence but at least not actively dripping despair. "Fantastic. Because if this doesn't work, we're about to become the universe's most elaborate meat piñatas," Jax quipped, his blaster humming gently in his grip. "And I'm not in the mood for a party. Have a little faith, Jax," Lysara said, her eyes on the alien constructs slinking through the ruins like the universe's ugliest parade. "We might just pull this off." "Faith," Jax snorted. "Last time I had faith, I ended up with 3 broken ribs and a vendetta against vending machines. Let's focus," Lysara cut in. Zainar hit it. Zainar took a deep breath, one that seemed to say he'd rather be anywhere else, and activated the device. The feedback loop pulsed outwards, an invisible wave carrying desperation and hope bound together in a fragile alliance. It was a bit like throwing a grenade and hoping the shrapnel only hit the other guys. The effect was instant. The alien constructs staggered, their coordinated movements dissolving into a chaotic dance of confusion and panic, like a nightclub on a bad night. The nightmare energy they'd been using like cheap fuel backfired, turning their own tech against them with a vengeance. "Look at that," Tenka grinned, his lopsided smile a beacon of grim satisfaction. "They're choking on their own nightmares, poetic justice," Sareen muttered, checking her gear with the precision of someone who had too often been the only thing standing between her team and death. "Let's make it count. Right, folks?" Lysara's voice cut through the mayhem like a scalpel, sharp and precise. "This is it. We hit them hard and fast. Make every shot count." Didn't exactly bring a lot of bullets to waste, Jax commented dryly, eyes locked on the chaos unfolding ahead. "But I'll see what I can do." They moved as one, a blend of reckless courage and stubborn determination. The constructs, usually so coordinated, were now like headless chickens, a flurry of limbs and confusion. The team pressed the advantage, their blasters singing a symphony of destruction. Jax, with the grace of a man who'd spent too much time doing this sort of thing, took cover behind a crumbling wall, picking off targets with a practiced efficiency. "I always said I wanted to give these bastards a taste of their own medicine," he mused between shots. "Didn't think it'd taste this sweet." "Focus, Jax," Lysara snapped, though there was a hint of pride beneath her commanding tone. "We're not done yet. No, but we're getting there, Tenka shouted over the din, taking out a construct with a shot that would have impressed the universe's most bored sniper. And I've got a dinner date with survival. Zynar was busy at the back, his mind a whirlwind of calculations as he kept the feedback loop running. He looked up just long enough to catch Lysara's eye. This is working better than expected, he admitted, surprise mingling with satisfaction on his usually anxious features. Don't jinx it, Sarene warned, her voice carrying the weight of experience. The universe loves a good twist ending. The battle continued, a brutal ballet of chaos and order, the team pushing forward with the kind of ferocity that came from knowing failure wasn't an option. The alien constructs, bereft of their usual coordination, fell back, their nightmare-fueled tech turned against them in a deliciously ironic twist. "Watch your left," Lysara called out, her voice precise and commanding. Her own blaster was a steady rhythm in the cacophony, each shot a reminder that they might just survive this after all. "On it," Sarene responded, dispatching a stumbling construct with a clinical efficiency. I'd almost feel bad for them if they hadn't tried to harvest our nightmares. "Yeah, well, karma's a bitch," Jack said, reloading with a speed born of necessity and fear. "And she's in a damn foul mood today." The constructs were regrouping, trying to adapt to the sudden reversal of fortune. But the team pressed hard, not giving them the chance to recover. It was a delicate dance of death and survival, each moment balanced on the edge of catastrophe. "Keep pushing," Lysara urged, her eyes blazing with the fire of a leader who knew that victory was within reach. "We've almost got them." The air was thick with dust and the acrid scent of alien tech burning under its own strain. But there was a lightness to the team's movements now, a sense that they were carving their own path through the chaos, one shot at a time. Zynar's voice cut through the noise, a beacon of hope in the madness. "The loop's holding. Just keep them on the back foot. Don't have to tell us twice." Tenka grinned, his confidence infectious as he downed another construct. "Feels good to be the ones doing the scaring for once." The battle was reaching its crescendo, the constructs faltering under the relentless onslaught. The team pushed harder, their determination carrying them forward like a wave that couldn't be stopped. As the last of the constructs fell, the ruins stood silent once more, the echoes of battle fading into the endless expanse of Zaaris. The team, weary but victorious, gathered amidst the wreckage, their breath mingling with the dust in a fragile peace. "We did it," Zynar said, disbelief and joy warring for dominance on his face. "We actually did it. Don't sound so surprised, Zynar," Lysara replied, though her voice held the same awe. "We're still here and that's what counts. Not bad for a bunch of meat piñatas, huh?" Jack said, his grin wide and unrepentant. "Not bad at all," Sarene agreed, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of lingering threats. "But let's not forget." Yeah, Tenka interrupted, his grin as lopsided as ever. "The universe isn't done with us yet, but for now let's just take the win." Lysara nodded, allowing herself a moment of triumph, a rare luxury in their line of work. "We'll regroup, figure out our next move. But right now we celebrate." "I'll drink to that," Jack said, holstering his blaster with a satisfied sigh. Even if the only thing on tap is sand. With the sun still an unrelenting presence overhead, they settled into a weary camaraderie, their laughter a fragile thread of hope amidst the ruins. "Can't believe we actually pulled it off," Zynar murmured, shaking his head as if trying to clear the last vestiges of doubt. "Believe it," Lysara replied, her smile a rare and beautiful thing, "because we're not done yet. There's still a lot of universe out there that needs dealing with." "Great," Jax muttered, though his grin betrayed his words. "More reasons to wish I'd stayed in bed." As they began to gather their gear and prepare for whatever lay ahead, the team knew one thing for certain. They'd faced the darkness and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting back, carving their own path in a universe that loved nothing more than to watch them fail. And they'd done it together, with snark and sarcasm, with grit and determination. Because sometimes that was all you needed. As the relentless sun of Zaaris continued to beat down, the team moved forward, their path uncertain but their resolve unshakable. They were more than just survivors, they were fighters and they'd keep fighting. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Onwards, Lysara said, her voice carrying the weight of command and the promise of a future they'd fought so hard to secure. Onwards, the team echoed, their steps steady and sure, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The wreckage of the constructs lay strewn across the ruins of Zaaris like discarded toys after a particularly violent tantrum. The dust began to settle, the silence punctuated only by the occasional ping of cooling metal. It was the kind of quiet that held its breath, waiting to see if the universe would throw another curveball. Lysara stood in the middle of it all, the sun still an unrelenting bastard overhead, contemplating the victory that smelled vaguely of burning circuits and sweat. She glanced at her team, each member wearing expressions of disbelief and exhaustion, like they'd just survived a particularly nasty hangover. "Looks like we're still the universe's least favorite chew toys," she said, the corner of her mouth twitching into a grim smile. "Speak for yourself," Jax replied, cradling his blaster like a beloved pet. "I've always fancied myself more of a stubborn roach. Survive anything, scuttle off into the darkness, and thrive on crumbs." "Crumbs aren't much of a diet," Tenka chimed in, wiping sweat and alien soot from his brow. "But I suppose it's better than being digested." Sarene, true to form, was already in motion, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of life, hostile or otherwise. "We need to secure the perimeter. No telling if any of those constructs decided to play dead." "Great," Jax muttered as he holstered his blaster. "More cardio, just what I needed." Zynar was still tinkering with the device, his fingers flying over its controls like a pianist on a caffeine high. He looked up, catching Lysara's eye with a mix of triumph and relief. "Looks like the feedback loop did its job. I'd say we've got a few hours, maybe more, before any systems try to reboot." "That's a few hours more than we usually get," Lysara noted. "Let's make the most of it before the universe gets bored and decides to kick us again." The team spread out, a ragtag bunch of survivors who'd managed to beat the odds long enough to start taking it personally. The ruins, once a haunting monument to alien hubris, now held the promise of something different, something better. **** Back at base camp, the mood was cautiously optimistic, or as optimistic as you could get on a world where the sun never took a nap. The colony had taken a beating, but it was still standing, a testament to human stubbornness and a refusal to let sentient nightmares ruin their day. Lysara found Zynar seated at a makeshift table, a pile of notes in front of him that looked ready to scatter at the first hint of wind. He was scribbling furiously, lost in a world of equations and ideas that only he seemed to understand. "Taking a break from saving our asses, I see," Lysara commented, dropping into a chair with a sigh that felt like it came from her bones. Zynar didn't look up, though his lips quirked into a smile. "Just considering ways to prevent the next apocalypse, for variety." "Variety's overrated," she replied, leaning back with her eyes half closed. "But I won't complain if you figure out how to keep us alive without the stress." "Working on it," Zynar promised, finally setting his pen down. "There's something in these ruins, something we've missed. I think it could change everything." Lysara opened one eye, skepticism evident. "Are you about to start talking about ancient prophecies and hidden destinies? Because I didn't sign up for that." "No, just science, I swear," Zynar chuckled. "The energy that powers these constructs, it's not just nightmares, it's a whole spectrum. If we can harness it, we get to power our coffee machines without needing to sell our souls," Jax interjected, appearing with all the stealth of a drunken bear. "Count me in." "Never pegged you for an optimist, Jax," Lysara said, though her tone was more teasing than accusatory. "Hey, I'm optimistic about the small things," Jax grinned. "Like not getting shot, not getting eaten, and finding out if those nightmares can power a mean espresso machine." "Well, don't hold your breath," Zynar advised. But there's potential here, something worth sticking around for. Lysara considered that, a slow nod forming as she looked out at the sprawling ruins. It's been a while since we had something to look forward to that wasn't just surviving the next day. Maybe it's time we started thinking about more than just survival, Zaaris suggested, his gaze following hers. Time to rebuild. Make Zaaris a place worth fighting for. Ambitious. I like it, Jax said, leaning against a wall with a relaxed ease that belied the tension still coiled in his muscles. But we might want to start with something simple, like fixing the air conditioning. Dream big, Jax, Tenka called over, clearly eavesdropping. Just don't forget to dream smart. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As the day wore on, the team fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal if you squinted hard enough. Repairs were underway, the ruins cleaned of immediate threats. And amidst it all, a sense of camaraderie and resilience took root, a stubborn weed refusing to die. Sareen took a moment to help Lysara with a stubborn piece of tech, her movements precise and practiced. Think the constructs will give us a breather? Not a chance, Lysara replied, though her tone was more resigned than bitter. But we've got a small window. Maybe we can make something of it. Small windows are all we ever get, Sareen noted, her eyes flicking to the horizon where the sun continued its eternal scowl. But they are enough. It's a start, Lysara agreed, her gaze following Sareen's. And sometimes that's all you need. Tenka wandered over, hands shoved into his pockets. I hear you two getting all philosophical. That's dangerous territory. Just contemplating the universe and its many ways to screw with us, Lysara said dryly. Ah, my favorite topic, Tenka grinned. But let's not get too comfortable. I'm sure there's a new disaster just waiting to be discovered. Optimism, Tenka, it's healthy, Sareen scolded with a smirk. Healthy? Ha, I prefer realism. Less disappointing, Tenka shot back, though his grin suggested he was more hopeful than he let on. Asterisk, 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 as the team gathered for an impromptu meal, mostly dried rations and dubious hydration packs, Lysara found herself absently jotting notes, a habit she'd picked up in her early days with the consortium. Her thoughts drifted to the possibilities Zaaris had mentioned, ideas that teased at the edge of her imagination. This place, for all its dangers, held secrets worth uncovering. Secrets that could redefine how they thought about survival. If nightmare energy could be harnessed in a safer way, the implications were staggering. It could be a new beginning, not just for Zaaris, but for any colony brave enough to face the universe and flip it the proverbial bird. Lost in thought? Jax asked, nudging her with an elbow as he settled beside her. Just wondering what we're going to do with this place, Lysara admitted. If we're going to build something new, I'd like it to be more than just another base camp. Thinking big, huh? I like it, Jax said, uncharacteristically serious for a moment. I mean, if we're stuck here, we might as well make it home. Home, Lysara repeated, testing the word. Yeah, I'd like that. Then let's make it happen, Jax replied, raising his canteen in a mock toast. To Zaaris, where the sun never sets and neither do we. The laughter that followed was genuine, the first real laughter they'd shared in what felt like forever. It was a sound that carried on the dry wind, bold and defiant, the kind of sound that dared the universe to do its worst. As the day waned and the sun continued its eternal glare, the team settled into the bones of a new beginning. There was hard work ahead, challenges and trials, but for now they had hope. And in a universe bent on crushing them, hope was a powerful weapon. Lysara looked around the circle at the faces of her team, her family. They were battered, bruised, but not beaten, not by a long shot. They'd come to Zaaris as explorers, as strangers in a world that wanted them gone. Now they stood as its defenders, ready to claim it as their own. Onwards, she said again, the word a mantra, a promise. Onwards, they echoed, their voices a tapestry of strength and solidarity. And as the relentless sun of Zaaris bore witness, they took their first steps into a future filled with possibilities. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, about daring to dream, to hope, to build. In the ruins, they found a new beginning. And for Lysara and her team, that was more than enough.